Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading in the One-Year Bible. My name is Stephen Mizell, and Jay Rivenbark and I are joined this week by Alyssa Bream. And today we're in Proverbs chapter 2. And we're talking about how wisdom guards our purity and some of the challenges of moral compromise, how wisdom can strengthen our purity, what boundaries should look like in our life. So I hope you'll grab your Bible and a pen and paper, and let's have a conversation around the Word of God. Hey everyone, today we're in the Proverbs portion of the reading from the One-Year Bible, and it is Proverbs 2, verses 16 through 22. And the context here is he's talking about how wisdom guards purity. That it's wisdom is not just this intellectual piece; it's a moral piece, and it warns about the temptations that destroy people's reputations, marriages, their futures, and how wisdom can protect us from things like seduction, manipulation, deception. Was there something outside of the questions that you had that you said, I want to make sure that we talk about this, or this one stuck out to me?
One of the things caught my attention out of verse 21, where it says, those with integrity will remain in it. And I put in my notes, integrity creates its own momentum. If you're in it, immersed in it, walk in it, live in it, you have a tendency to stay there. But getting there can be a challenge because of all the distractions that he talks about.
For me, this led to some self-reflection about maybe why I didn't fall down some of those paths like that could have led to that. And I think like what you were saying, that momentum, like once you make one right choice, it's easier to make the next right choice and the next right choice. And
the opposite is true.
But then when you're in the middle of those right choices, those bad choices aren't even around.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there was some good choices that I made early in life that helped propel that. And I didn't walk down any crooked paths and see any loose women.
We're glad of that. Rarely is it a right or wrong decision. And Andy Stanley makes that case, that it's usually a series of unwise decisions that puts you in the right or wrong, to make it easy to choose wrong. And I would say that's been my experience, is that it's a series of unwise choices that neither are right or wrong, that puts you in a place that you can compromise what is right or wrong. So why is moral compromise so dangerous? Why is that such a dangerous thing?
I think besides some of the things we talked about, where you kind of, once you make a bad decision, it's easier to make a second bad decision. And sometimes then there's only bad decisions that can go on from there. The thing that came to my mind was sensitivity to God's voice. Once you start to ignore God's prompting in those situations and make the bad decisions, once you start to ignore his voice, it's easier to do it a second time. And then it's just not even a part of your brain. It's not a part of your thought process anymore to consider what would be the righteous thing to do in the situation. And that, I think, is a really valuable thing, to listen to God's voice and to follow it. And you need it when you're in those bad decisions and it's harder to hear.
Yeah, it's like the slippery slope principle. You start on a path and it's slow maybe at first, but it's systematic, and it just gets progressive more and more and more till you get to a place that maybe even you ask yourself the question, how did I get here? The answer is bad choices, bad decisions early on, usually small, I would say at first, over a period of time until it gets completely out of hand.
Yeah, I would say most compromises to morality are small in the beginning, but they rarely stay small.
Yeah.
That's why they talk about the slippery slope of compromise. Whenever you're whenever there's a negotiation, right? There's and usually you're not negotiating immorality, but I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility, but they're negotiating some kind of agreement or whatever. Compromise becomes a big deal, but often the minute that you give on one thing, right, you no longer have the leverage. And the same is true in morality. The minute that you give on something, you lose the leverage. And I think it just sin or immorality is rarely compartmentalized. People say, well, business is business and my spiritual life is my spiritual life, or, I remember that was a famous refrain, talking point with one of our presidents. Your personal life is your personal life, and you're still no. Here's what I'm going to tell you: you can't compromise the number one relationship in your life and it not affect everything else. Yeah. It's not possible. And I think we discount that, and it's so dangerous because it bleeds into other people's lives and everything else in our life. So, he talks about, obviously, Proverbs is a wisdom book. How does wisdom strengthen our purity?
Well, he talks about some practical things. One, and to me, it's kind of two divisions here, even in this short passage that we have read today. There are things that you need to avoid and stay away from. There are some don'ts on the list of wisdom. Mm-hmm. And flip side to that, there are things to do related to wisdom. He talks about follow steps of the good or good examples, stay on the paths of righteousness. And that's followed after he says, don't stay away. This is bad for you. And so as it relates to purity, absolutely, it will guard you from some things you need to not do and stay away from, and it will cause you to pursue some things. And so it's proactive as well as defensive.
Hopefully, wisdom will help you see the consequences a little clearer, that you will maybe listen to some people who have had experiences or in those situations, and listen to wise voices and wise counsel and look at scripture and be able to see that that's not a wise choice, and being able to see what's going to happen. Like, if I do this, then this is a pretty inevitable thing. That can stop you from making that first choice that maybe isn't so horrible, but the next thing that would come after that is going to cause some fracturing of relationships, harm to yourself and those around you. It just can expand.
Yeah. I think wisdom thinks long term and recognizes the detriment to things beyond what you can see right this particular minute. Wisdom kind of sees the road, if you will, and knows, all right, this is where this is going to take me. You use the word consequences, and my experience is that most of the time people know the consequences. They just don't have the wisdom to avoid them. They think they're the exception to the rule. This isn't going to happen to me. I'm not going to get caught. It's not that big of a deal. It's only one time, whatever the, excuse is to exempt yourself. But I think wisdom sees long term and says, you know what, the consequences of this, even, so I'll speak for myself personally. There are some places that it is easy for me to practice knowing what the long-term thing is, right? So I'll give you an example of how I practice it and how I don't practice it. So I max out every retirement account that is available to me. I put as much as I possibly can away. and I'm over 55 now, so I have catch-up rules that I can even add more to it. You know, so I just put as much away as I possibly can. I don't see it, but I know, I'm smart enough to know, and I've seen enough people get to mid 60s and have not much left, you know. That's a discipline, and I think nothing about it, right? It doesn't faze me to have that much money taken out of a paycheck or whatever. But I'm not that disciplined when it comes to eating. I know the consequences of that cheesecake brownie that I had yesterday.
I avoided it.
I didn't. Well, yeah, but you have other issues that might create cause that a problem.
Built-in boundaries.
That's right. I might need some built-in boundaries myself. But every time I took a bite, I knew, right? I know this isn't the best thing for me. But I didn't stop.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is wisdom in and of itself is insufficient. There has to be some discipline and some action that's attached to it.
Well, I would say discipline and action are a piece of wisdom. That's what I would say. I just think there are times we know it, we know the consequences, and we go, okay,
just choose.
I want to do it. And, and then there are other times we go, you know what, I'll run this off this evening.
And how did the cheesecake brownies end up at staff meeting?
I asked for them. Yeah, for Wendy's birthday. That's
he was leading us all down a path of destruction.
I was taking everybody down the path of fatness. Last question: how can boundaries honor both God and relationships? How do boundaries operate, and how do they honor God in relationships?
One of the things that gets talked about, and it's always the first thing that comes to my mind when we talk about boundaries and this kind of a question, is the Billy Graham rule. And I probably should have looked up more of what that is exactly, but basically it's that a man and a woman that aren't married shouldn't be alone together to preserve any possibility of there being an issue.
Or appearance. And I think that was as much
right.
As
especially for somebody like Billy Graham. I mean, he doesn't need any sort of person making an accusation, you know? So, and there's been conversations on staff about how that works out practically, because with a small staff, it's not like we can always pile 3 people in a car to go somewhere, things like that. And then I saw, I think I saw this on Twitter, somebody who had worked at the Billy Graham Foundation, and they said, this is how practically it worked out for us. They said, because we couldn't be in a car together when there was a man and a woman that needed to go on an event together, the organization would cough up the money to pay for separate cars for both people. They had set up their dining room to be really nice there and to be very open so that you would be able to have business lunches there so you could eat in a place where there'd be lots of people around who are all like knowing what's going on. You'd be able to eat with just 2 people and it wouldn't break any of those rules. And so I think there's times when you need to have those conversations and there's times when you need to respect those boundaries, but I think you can find ways to do both. And I think that was a really good example that I read about that.
Yeah, boundaries, guardrails. I think that might have been an Andy Stanley small group study back in the day, I think years ago, that I participated in. All those things are put in place to honor each other, honor yourself, honor each other, and to honor God, because it's so much easier to prevent those types of issues. You know, this chapter he's talking about immorality. That's kind of the example he's using. Both in touched on that in your example. It's not only the actuality of impropriety, but the appearance of. You know, that's even a higher level and standard, and that's what boundaries do. And so, in essence, it protects us as protect the name of the Lord at the same time. So it's really important.
Yeah. What's the old saying about fences? tall fences or make good neighbors, or something to that effect. It's I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it is there becomes no question about where the boundary is. And I think boundaries are tough. They are hard to stand by. They do create complications, you know, that make some situations challenging. And, you know, Henry Cloud is the king of boundaries, you know, boundaries for marriage, boundaries in general, boundaries for children. You know, he's got, I don't know, a lot of boundary books. But, you know, he is, and that is usually a really significant piece of professional counseling, is teaching people how to have boundaries in relationships so that they're not encroached on. And it's not always about morality. Sometimes it is just about impeding on someone's life with your own problems. And, you know, I think the way I wrote it in my notes is, anything that we treasure, we find ways to protect. And I'm trying to figure out if I can use this example or not. But if my wife ever says, no, right, that's a bad idea, I'm going to honor that. You know, I can think of a situation recently where she said, I'm trying to figure out how to say, I want to be very careful here. You need to be careful. That's essentially what she said. You just need to be careful. And I take that to heart. And here's why. I treasure that relationship, and anything that she would feel would encroach on that relationship, I will happily say, you know what, I'm going to avoid that. And I think we have to be aware of the things. And it's not always, the one thing I want to say about this is, you know, he talks a lot about adultery in the context of Proverbs, but there are a lot of other things we need boundaries for.
Absolutely.
And this may not even be our challenge, right? It could be something completely different. And, you know, the boundary for the cheesecake brownies would have been not to order them, right? That's the boundary.
Yeah.
You shouldn't order them, bring them to the
Set
table
them
for
on the
everybody,
table and then say, I'm not touching.
Yeah, I'm going to resist, right? I had a choice well before they ever showed up and appeared in front of my face. And I think that's the thing we have to be aware of with boundaries and guarding morality, is long before it's present, we've had some choices that would have kept it at bay. Thank you for joining us again today on this edition of One Single Story. Just remember, compromise can begin with a whisper, but it often ends in a wreck. And we can avoid it before it becomes wreckage in our life. Hope you'll join us again on the next edition of One Single Story.